In this movie, the third of the special effects camera movement, we've set up our scene to play nice with the camera when we actually move it through the scene. We've also set up the objects so that they have rotational behaviors to point at the camera so we can't really tell they're two-dimensional objects. We'll need to do that and double check that that's the case with Windsor. I'll open the layer options and we see that he too has been set up to rotate to face the camera. Now Windsor has his own animations, and before we get into the camera movement, I did want to point out something that's a little different than the way we've been setting up scenes. Typically we'll set up everything on frame 0. One of the reasons we're not doing that now is that happens to be, of course, the rigging frame where Windsor is exploded across the scene. And so it's easier to set up some of this and get it cued into three-dimensional space on frame 1 and then animate from that point forward. In fact, our animation is probably going to go beyond 72 frames. We'll have it go up to 90 frames. The idea here is that we're going to have the camera further away. It will do a little bit of a dramatic zoom in. We'll also have it shift left to right, so we get a little bit of difference in what's called parallax or perspective between the objects in the background, moving slightly different to just help the viewers cue into the fact that this is actually a three-dimensional space. So on frame 1 right here, we'll go ahead and select the camera tools, and I'll use the camera zoom tool, which is keyboard shortcut 5. I'm going to go ahead and back the camera out a little bit. I'll shift to the pan tool, keyboard shortcut 4 over here. I should say the track tool. And then I'm going to go ahead and now use the pan tool right here, keyboard shortcut 7, to look at our character just a little bit. Now the trees and Windsor are looking directly at the camera. Now I want to zoom up to be, kind of slow and easy. We'll come out to frame 42. I'm going to go ahead and use the zoom tool and come in closer. I'm going to use the track tool and pull over to this angle just a little bit, and use the pan tool just to go ahead and turn our camera a little bit so we get some real nice motion. So now when we go ahead and scrub the timeline, we see Windsor doing his thing. We see some nice differences between foreground and background. Our camera comes to frame 42. It rests there. And then what I'll do is have very, very slow motion over here all the way on frame 90. What I'll do is go ahead and pan the camera just a little bit more. So now as we scrub the timeline, that's a very subtle shift. But what this will allow us to do from frame 42 on, and let's scroll down in our timeline just a little bit. You see the keyframes are already added. What I want to do at the keyframe for the camera right here is to go ahead and I will right click, you can control click if you're on the Mac, and choose noisy. This is going to give us a tweener that puts in some artificial vibration and makes it very easy for us to create that boom, boom, boom effect of Godzilla walking nearby. I don't want the amplitude to be very great, so I'm going to put it down to 0.5. The scale of this I want to be something more like 1 instead of 2, and select OK. I'll go ahead and drag the camera here, and we see now that we get just a little bit of extra motion in there, and that may actually be too much. So let me come back, and one of the reasons is because it's so close to the character. Come down to noisy. I'm going to change this instead of 0.5 to 0.2 and make it a little less significant, and select OK. Now when I go ahead and drag, there we get some nice comic books type of movement around here. We could add sound effects to that. The last little step we'll want to do is to actually come back to the scene settings. We know we've got a keyframe out at frame 90 right now. And to the project settings here, we'll go ahead and say, let's do the entire animation. We'll render this out to end frame of 90. The other thing I want to do is engage depth of field. Now this is going to give us some fake camera blurring the way, or as things get further away from the camera itself. The focus distance is within a value of 2 in your scene. And I'm actually going to want a focus range of 2 as well. I don't want our main character to blur out. So I'll give that a value of 2, and then I'm going to reduce the maximum blur to something not quite so aggressive as 12. I'm going to go ahead and put that at 3 and select OK. Now nothing has changed here, and that's because this is a rendered effect. So from this point right here, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick render. We see our character in perfect crisp focus. We see the objects in the background get a little more blurry as they move further away, and that's perfect. The next thing then is to go ahead and render out our scene and see how this looks. Command E on the Mac or Control E on the PC. We want the entire animation. We'll go to QuickTime Movie. I'll select OK. It'll say where do you want to save it and name it. We'll name it that, and we'll actually save this into our camera movement folder right here, so you can view that if you want. We use the animation codec because it's the most efficient for areas of flat color. I'll go ahead and leave that right there, and we'll click OK. Our render starts, and it looks like sometimes our character is missing some parts of them, but it's rendering. And there our render wraps up. It goes ahead and automatically kicks open QuickTime. We can see our animation in action, and there's our character. Oh no, here comes Godzilla. That's moving the camera in 3D in Anime Studio Pro.